Hello and welcome to the technical workshop for the Historical Heritage Grant Program. I'm April Smith, Management Analyst with the County of Santa Clara Parks and Recreation Department, and with me is Christian Elliott, Senior Management Analyst with the department.
Good morning, everyone.
In our workshop today, we'll be covering the following topics: program overview, applicant eligibility, project eligibility and requirements, funding requirements, evaluation factors, and application tips. We'll show you several sample projects and also have a question and answer time. If you have questions during the presentation, you're welcome to write them in the chat window or save them for the question and answer period at the conclusion of the presentation. Depending on the question, we may provide a brief answer during the presentation or choose to respond to it later. This workshop is intended to provide an overview of the grant program and application process. It won't be possible to cover every detail of the procedural guide in this brief workshop, so it's important that applicants familiarize themselves with the guide. The Board of Supervisors of the County of Santa Clara established the Historical Heritage Grant Program, otherwise known as HHGP, in 1990 to promote historic preservation and the awareness of significant cultural, historical, and archaeological resources within Santa Clara County. Since the inception of the grant program, nearly $8.3 million has been invested to support historic preservation. Funding is provided through the dedication of a portion of the county park charter development funds to the HHGP. This round of the grant is known as the Fiscal Year 2022 Historical Heritage Grant Program. $914,095 is available in this round. Who's eligible? Local public agencies or nonprofit corporations with 501c3 certification located within the geographical limits of Santa Clara County are eligible to apply for grant funds for projects within the geographical limits of Santa Clara County. The project must be located in a public park or on private property dedicated to park purposes. A public park is a park that is owned or operated by the county, a city, or other public agency, such as an open space district. Eligible private property is land fitting all of the following criteria. It is land that is actually used and dedicated for use for park purposes by deed or other long-term legal agreement, and also land that is open to the public on a non-discriminatory basis, and land that is designated for park use under the applicable general plan and zoning designation. Feel free, if anybody has any questions, to go ahead and put them in the chat, and we're happy to address those for you. Eligible private property is land fitting all of the, The HHGP is limited to projects involving the development of real property as opposed to personal property. Real property consists of land and things affixed to land that cannot be moved. Grant projects require compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA. Check with your local city or county planning agency for more information on how to complete CEQA. All projects require one of the following: a notice of exemption filed with and stamped by the county clerk, or an initial study with a negative declaration and a copy of the notice of determination filed with and stamped by the county clerk, or an initial study and environmental impact report and a copy of the notice and determination filed with and stamped by the county clerk. So every Oh,
One
go
of
ahead.
the critical things here is that it is, even if your project may be exempt from CEQA, that you have filed that notice of exemption with the county clerk. That's the critical thing about CEQA for this grant program, is that everything must be filed with the county clerk.
Thank you, Christian.
Sure.
Property owner resolution. All projects must have written approval in the form of a resolution from the property owner that the property will be used for park purposes for a minimum of 20 years and open to all Santa Clara County residents on a non-discriminatory basis. The program also requires that the resolution delegate an authorized representative by title to sign and submit the grant application. The resolution must adhere to the form and language of Appendix E of the procedural guide. On Appendix E, you'll find a sample there of a resolution.
And typically, the person that is delegated authority to sign the application might be like a city manager, or if it's a nonprofit organization, it could be like the president of that organization.
Projects must involve a locally designated historic resource. It's a landmark or contributing resource to a local historic district or the equivalent, protected by city or county historic preservation ordinance. If the historic resource is not locally designated at the time of the grant application, the applicant must complete the designation process prior to the date on which the Historical Heritage Commission recommendations for funding is made to the Board of Supervisors. To help ensure keeping the process on schedule, we request that applicants complete the designation process before the HHC makes its funding recommendation determinations. To clarify, the property being listed on the historic resource inventory is not sufficient. Listing is not the same as designation. The property must be a locally designated historic resource, meaning it is protected by a city or county historic preservation ordinance. Even if the property has achieved federal or state recognition, it will still require local designation in order to be eligible under this grant program. Projects must involve the stabilization, preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and/or interpretation of a locally designated historic resource. Projects that involve stabilization, preservation, rehabilitation, or restoration must consist of capital improvements that will materially extend or ensure the useful life of the asset, as opposed to deferred maintenance or general maintenance. Projects that involve the interpretation of historic resources must involve capital improvements, such as permanent interpretive signage affixed to the land or structure, rather than reports, studies, or movable objects.
That's a lot of information, I know. Are there any questions at this point that you might have? We've still a few more to go, but it's a lot to digest, I know.
Okay, we'll move on. I will now discuss some of the low funding priorities. Low funding priorities are projects or elements of a project that involve state or federal code compliance, infrastructure improvements such as utilities, landscaping and signage, new construction such as an addition to a historic resource, or interior finishes that are not preservation focused. In addition, projects or grantees that have previously received HHGP funds may be considered a low funding priority. Projects that are ineligible for funding would include projects in the planning or feasibility stage. Grant funding cannot be used for historic resource surveys, historic reports, conditions assessments, or feasibility studies. projects involving the reconstruction or replication of a historic resource that no longer exists, and projects involving the purchase of real or personal property. For example, movable objects not permanently attached to real property, such as equipment, computers, furniture, movable display cabinets, interior accessories, or publications. Projects involving areas of the historic resource that are used for administrative or non-public functions. Grant funds cannot be used to develop or to support areas dedicated to the operation, maintenance, or administrative activities. For example, work on a portion of a facility dedicated to staff or private use, such as offices, storage, or private reception areas. Such functions may exist within the facility, but the HHGP cannot fund work items specifically in these areas. Grant funding must be applied to areas of the facility that are open or visible to all Santa Clara County residents on a non-discriminatory basis. The funding requirements. Projects must have all of the necessary funding in place to complete the project, excluding the HHGP grant amount at the time of application. HHGP funds cannot be used as seed money to leverage additional monies for future fundraising campaign. So the Historical Heritage Commission, they want to see projects that are shovel ready, that are ready to go. So you've got everything in place and you're just ready to move forward with it. Christian, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's we may have some questions later on about that, but
Yeah.
no, I think you've stated that very well.
Thank you. And this,
Can I have a question, please?
yes,
Hello?
go ahead.
Oh, it looks like someone's muted, so I don't see.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Wen, you can either put your question in the chat or at the end, we're going to open it up so you can ask it, or if it's a short question, you can ask it now. Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and move on for now.
Okay.
Grant funds are issued on a reimbursement basis only, based upon the completion of the grant funding agreement requirements. You can see the procedural guide for more information on reimbursements. So there is no provision for advance funding for this grant program. A grantee cash contribution is not required. However, the proposed project may receive a higher rating from reviewers if the applicant demonstrates a commitment to the project by providing or securing additional funding from other sources. In-kind contributions and services such as volunteer labor, administration staff time devoted to managing the project, etc., are not considered a grantee cash contribution. Applicants may discuss any in-kind contributions in their project budget section of the project proposal. It looks like we might have a question here in the chat now.
Okay.
Okay. What evidence do you need for us to show that we have the funds available? Well,
It would be listed in, you would discuss it in your project narrative in the appendix C of the project proposal. In the budget section, you could discuss it in there in the narrative as well. You would list it in appendix D. Sorry, that our funding, the funding sources form, it's appendix F. You would show it on appendix F as a funding source, the amount of money, and like you would list it as if it were in a bank account, or if it were another grant source that you had secured already. You would list it there on appendix F and on the funding sources form, as well as describe it in the narrative section of the project proposal. Does that sound good to you, April?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Mr. Wen, do you have, did that answer it for you? we can discuss it with you afterwards if you need more information too. So,
Yeah. Okay, next slide, right?
yes. Application evaluation factors?
Yeah.
Okay. Applications which are determined to be eligible for consideration for funding will be evaluated and ranked according to the factors shown in Appendix I of the procedural guide. Some of those factors include the protection of historic resource, public benefit, clear, effective scope of work, project management capabilities, and reasonable and complete project budget. Now we'll go over some application packet tips with you. Appendix A of the procedural guide contains the application packet requirements and checklists. Here on the slide, you can see it, kind of an image of it, so you can find it in your guide. It should be on page 13, I believe. And you want to only submit items listed in Appendix A and do not make any modifications to the order of Appendix A items when assembling your packet. That'll just help us as we're processing them to make sure everything is in order. That would be best. And going on to Appendix C, this is the project proposal in which applicants are asked to provide a response to various evaluation factors. This slide shows you the first page. It's about 3 pages worth of questions, and when you get all done, it could be up to 20 pages long of information. So this is really where you're going to talk about your project and make sure you follow the formatting guidelines that are provided with regard to such things as the page numbering, the font size, and the margin size.
And be sure to respond to each of the bullet items. That's very important as well. And if something is not applicable, you would need to explain how it is not applicable. There should be no yes and no responses. That we're looking for narrative responses to all of these bullet points.
Correct, right. So if it's not applicable, just NA won't be effective. You'll want to actually describe why that it's not applicable in the case of your project. But most of these questions I think are designed where, you know, qualifying projects are going to have an answer probably to most everything.
Right.
And that Appendix C starts on page 15 of the procedural guide. And a few more application packet tips here. This may seem obvious, but it's important to state. Please read and follow all instructions in the application and procedural guide. And you'll want to start working on your application now. Although the application is due October 21st, we've released the program already to give applicants plenty of time to assemble a complete application packet. Things like governing body resolutions, CEQA filings, etc. Those can take a long time, so you want to get started on that now. Remember that CEQA must be filed and stamped by the county clerk's office. The completed application packet must be submitted electronically via DocuSign, so no mailed or emailed applications are accepted. And you'll want to contact us or staff by October 13th to request a DocuSign link for your specific application. And we love to receive applications well before the deadline. So when your application is ready, please contact us and we can get that link sent right out to you. Also, if you turn it in early, that gives us a chance, you know, to kind of look it over before the due date and maybe provide you some feedback. So that can help you out if you're unsure. We're just going to go over a review, the review process highlights. To briefly summarize the review process, after the grant application submittal deadline, there's an initial staff review. Page 8 of the application and procedural guide provides more detail and an estimated timeline for the competitive review process. Next, applications are reviewed and evaluated for eligibility by the Historical Heritage Commission. After the HHC makes eligibility determinations, applicants deemed eligible for funding may make a brief presentation of their project to the HHC. The HHC may make a project site visit as part of their evaluation. The HHC will then rank the projects and make their make funding recommendations. Those funding recommendations will then be presented to the Board of Supervisors, who make the final award determinations. And now we're going to share with you some reasons why applications can't move forward. In general, projects must be ready to go. All planning, design, permitting, CEQA must be completed at the time of application. Generally, an application doesn't move forward because of unresolved issues related to a project that's in the planning and feasibility stage. Design and specifications have not been finished. Permits have not yet been obtained. CEQA documents have not been filed with the county. There's no property owner resolution. Or the project did not have all necessary funding in place to complete the project, excluding the HHGP grant amount. So does anybody have any questions on that, or should we keep moving? You have anything to add, Christian?
No, I think you did a good job.
Okay.
With that.
All right, so now we're going to go over some important dates. Some of this is kind of a repeat, but they are important. So the applications are due no later than 5 p.m. on October 21st, 2021. Remember that applications must be submitted electronically via DocuSign, and you want to contact the staff at least a week before to request a DocuSign link for your specific application. The anticipated timeline is as follows. The Historical Heritage Commission makes their eligibility determinations, ideally in January or February of 2022. And these are anticipated times. They may fluctuate a little bit. And the Historical Heritage Commission, they make their funding recommendations to the Board of Supervisors in April or May of 2022. And then the projects are considered by the Board of Supervisors in June or July of 2022. And that specific timeline, those approximate times can be found on page 8 of your procedural guide. Now we'd like to share with you some of the past HHG projects. This is the Heritage Theater in Campbell at 1938 Campbell Union High School Auditorium, designed by William Weeks. The school closed in 1980. It's owned by the city of Campbell and is used as a community performing arts center. It's received 4 grants in 1998, 2000, 2001, and 2002, totaling $220,510. Those grants covered things like the structural restoration of the walls and roof for seismic repairs, and the interior wall refinishing and unique stenciled ceiling and tiles restoration. The Montalvo Art Center in Saratoga, they've had several projects over the years. The Art Center was built in 1912 by California Senator James D. Phelan. Upon his passing, he left Montalvo to the people of California for the advancement of art, architectural, and cultural practice. It's served Santa Clara County as a cultural center since 1930. This is one of their projects from 2015, totaling $21,656, and it was for the restoration of the villa doors and lantern. And in the center there, you can see an example of the acknowledgement placard that would be required for a project that receives funding from this grant program. The Immigrant House in Mountain View, they received a grant in 2016 for $50,000. The grant provided funds for carpentry, the rehabilitation of windows, new roof shingles, gutters and downspouts, and finishes such as wallpaper and paint. In the 30s and 40s, this house provided a low-cost place to live for some of the many immigrant workers who came to the area.
And you'll see an example there of their acknowledgement plaque as well.
Right. This is the Sea Scout building at the Palo Alto Baylands, circa 1941, built in the streamlined modern style. It was former home to local Sea Scouts, the largest base in the region, which is the Sea Scouts are an offshoot of the Boy Scouts that taught boys and girls how to excel in water activities like sailing, sea customs, compass reading, etc. It's the current site of the Environmental Volunteer Eco Center, and they received a grant in 2007 for $32,500 for the restoration of the promenade and bridge decks. The Spagnoli Tank House and Los Altos History Museum in Los Altos is one of our more recently completed projects. They received a grant in 2018 for $100,000. The project was completed in 2020, and it consisted of preserving the tank house by repairing the roof, siding, tank, and platform. You can see they're placing the tank, so it's quite a project. And another more recent one is the Hiram Morgan Hill House, located in Morgan Hill, built in 1884 at Villa Miramonte in its original location. They received a grant in 2018 for $185,250 for the replacement of wood shingles, repair of the upper floor stained glass windows, renovation of the south wall, and repairs to the veranda. The project was completed in 2020. Program documents such as the fiscal year 2022 application and procedural guide and application attachments A through F in Word format can be found on the Park Department's website at parkhere.org. In addition to this workshop, we're available to answer questions about this program and the application process. The best way to reach us is via email. Staff can provide guidance on the program eligibility requirements and can pre-screen applications to provide feedback, which may assist you in making a stronger application. Don't wait until the last minute to take advantage of this. This concludes our prepared presentation. We're happy to receive questions now if you have any. Are there any questions at this time? And you can feel free to, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you, or put it in the chat, or I just want to open it up if anybody has anything.
Can you unmute, April?
Hmm?
Can you unmute everyone?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I appreciate very much the presentation. I'm very familiar with the process because I've been there before. And I'm very happy that I have a chance to reapply for this grant. And I just have a few questions, but I will send an email to April Smith asking a clarification of a few points, okay?
Yes, that would be great. I'll look forward to that and working with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Okay,
But
thanks.
I very much appreciate this opportunity. And we've been here before, we've been there before, and we're gonna reapply to make sure that we are eligible.
Great. We're glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
That's it.
Brady or Christina, do you have any questions?
No, that was very comprehensive and addressed everything that I think we were hoping to find out with where possible projects we have in mind. So thank you guys for this this workshop.
Super. Thank you for coming.
And again, I'll just add that we are more than happy to pre-screen applications, and we really would encourage folks to take advantage of that, because that can really save a lot of problems down the road. We would love to see, you know, everyone that's possible, that's eligible, you know, that their applications can move forward. So by getting things in early, and give us an opportunity to assist you in proceeding.
Right. Thank you, Christian.
Sure. Are there any other questions? And again, if you're not, you know, don't have questions for us now, feel free to contact us, as April said, via email. We're more than happy to answer any questions and to be of assistance.
That's
Definitely.
great.
This is Christina. I work with Brady, and I echo the sentiment of being grateful for the opportunity. We're out at the Rangsdorf House, City of Mountain View, within Shoreline at Mountain View. And as we're looking at the feasibility process right now, I was wondering if there are, if this is an annual grant, and in terms of timing and you know, meeting those eligibility guidelines.
That's an excellent question. And yes, it is an annual program. And if you are, you know, perhaps not as far as you'd like to be in the process, depending on, you know, on the timing, et cetera, you know, you could, it's pretty reliable that it's going to be released approximately this time each cycle. It's always, of course, dependent on the board's decision of funding the program, but it's been, you know, since 1990, with the exception of a couple of years, it's been pretty much every year.
And then my other question was about the average size of the grant. I'm sure that it would depend upon the appeal of the project, but if in terms of a 30-year re-restoration assessment that we're looking at, I'm wondering about you know, grant size recommendations you might have.
You know, they vary all over the place. It really, I mean, there have been, you know, some that have been hundreds of thousands of dollars, and others that are very, you know, small, $5, $10, $15, $20,000. So and every cycle's a little bit different. It depends on how much funding is available. Some years we'll get requests that don't fully exhaust all of the available funding. The fund balance might roll over occasionally. So it's really difficult to say, you know, there isn't a typical project size. We've had major projects and minor ones. So I don't know if that's helpful or not to you, but that's kind of where what we've been seeing.
Yeah, thank you.
In the last cycle that just concluded, there were 2 awards that were made, and one was for a little over $12,000, and the other one was for $333,000. So it's pretty big spread.
Yeah,
so
quite a bit range.
if they determine that it's a worthwhile project, then, you know, this pretty good shot, if it meets all the requirements, that it can receive funding. Where it becomes a competitive process is when there's obviously more funds being requested than what's available. So, you know, then they have to determine.
The other thing which
them.
I would add, since you mentioned about it, potential re-restoration of many years, if the project, there's always the potential of doing phases, and because like we said earlier, the commission is looking for projects that are ready to go and can be completed within the grant funding period, which is 3 years. So in some cases, we've had projects or applicants that have come back and just been able to complete, you know, a particular phase of a restoration project. That's not unheard of. We did mention earlier that previous grantees might be ranked a little bit lower on the, but that doesn't mean that they will be excluded from receiving funding. It all depends on how many applications were received in that in that cycle, and the commission generally has a preference for newer grantees that have not received funding previously. But anyway, that just might be in the mix for you as you're kind of determining how to, feasibility, et cetera.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I had noted that in when we heard about the other projects. So we'll definitely keep that in mind. And thank you for the guidance.
Sure. Any other questions?
No, very comprehensive. I'm very happy to be there. I'm very happy to listen to the presentations.
Well, thanks very much. And thank you, April, for the excellent presentation today. And
Thank you.
Feel free to contact us. We'll be more than happy to help in any way we can.
Yep, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and conclude for now then. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
So
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I leave right now, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks again. Have a nice day, you guys.
you. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.